It was a crisp morning in my neck of the woods. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying a steaming cup of black coffee, watching the sun break over my acres of land. The fields were still quiet, except for the rustling of the wind through the trees. I'd worked hard for this land. Every inch of it. It was mine, bought with blood, sweat, and years of sacrifice. That's when I saw them coming. At first, it was just a dust cloud in the distance, but then I saw the black SUVs speeding down the dirt road toward my ranch. The tires kicked up a storm of dust behind them, and I knew something was off. These guys weren't just out for a stroll. I stood up slowly, setting my coffee down, the sun rising behind me like something out of a western. The first SUV came to a screeching halt right in front of the gate, the engine still rumbling as the doors slammed open. Out they came, four of them, dressed in matching vests that read HOA Enforcement Unit. Fake badges that looked like they came from a toy store. And one of them was holding something that looked like a paintball gun, all dressed up to look like a rifle. The man in the lead, with mirrored sunglasses and a posture like he owned the place, pointed it at me, barking out orders like I was some sort of criminal. "This is a legal HOA inspection," he shouted. "Step away from the property." I didn't move. Not an inch. Not even a blink. See, I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I've seen real danger, real combat. And these guys? They were just playing dress up. But they didn't know that. They didn't know the kind of storm they'd just walked into. One of them started shouting to the others, "Sweep the barns. Secure the perimeter." The third GA was carrying a clipboard, started snapping pictures of my tractor, my fence, anything he could point a camera at. I stood there, my hands resting calmly on the porch rail, eyes scanning every movement they made. I could feel the tension building in my chest, the same kind I got before a big operation. But I kept my voice steady. "Y'all got about 10 seconds to explain who you are and what you're doing on my ranch before things get real bad," I said, my voice low and calm. One of them shouted back, "We've got the right to be here. Your ranch is in violation of HOA Code 52A. This land is under VYEW. That's when I realized. No one had mentioned an HOA Code 52A because it didn't exist. The badges were fake. The patches were crooked. These were just a bunch of guys who'd been told to come here and act tough. I slowly stepped off the porch, keeping my eyes locked on the guy with the fake gun. He pointed it directly at my chest and yelled, "Back up. You don't want to mess with us." I gave him one last warning. "You boys picked the wrong ranch." In a flash, I disarmed him, twisted the fake weapon from his hand, and slammed him onto the ground before he could blink. The others froze. I was trained for real combat, and they were playing dress-up. "Everybody on the ground," I shouted. "Now." They dropped like toddlers caught stealing candy. One of them even whimpered, "Please don't hurt us." And just like that, I had them. My dog Murphy, a big old German shepherd, came running out from the barn, barking low. One of the men, completely terrified, wet himself. I could see the stains spreading down his khakis as he fell flat in the dirt. Just then, I heard Mrs. Larson, my neighbor, shouting across the field, "Frank, what's going on?" That's when it all clicked. These weren't just random guys. They were from the new development down the road. The same group of HOA nutjobs that had been trying to claim my ranch was part of their community. Except it wasn't. Not even close. I tied them up with zip ties, took them under the shade of an old oak tree, and called the sheriff. But it wasn't just about calling the law. I needed to know who had the nerve to send these clowns out here, to send them all the way to my ranch like it was their property. While I waited, I sat back on my porch, arms crossed, watching the imposters squirm on the ground. The guy with the clipboard kept mumbling, "We didn't know he was a SEAL. We didn't know." The sheriff finally arrived, about 30 minutes later, lights flashing. When he saw the group on the ground, he let out a long whistle. "Frank," he said, tipping his hat, "what in God's name happened here?" "They claimed to be HOA police," I said, "tried to storm my property like I'm growing something illegal in the barn. They're fakes." Sheriff Harris shook his head in disbelief. He took their eyed SWAT few they had and started questioning them. The leader, a guy named Kyle, stammered, "We were told this property was part of a new zone. The HOA president said we needed to bring you in line. You've been dodging fines." That's when it hit me. The HOA president was a real estate developer named Ted Warner. He'd been trying to buy my ranch for over a year. Every offer he sent was pitiful, but I turned him down each time. Looks like he decided to use scare tactics next. Sheriff Harris looked as mad as I was. "You folks are in big trouble." They were cuffed and loaded into the sheriff's cruiser, But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Later that night, I stood on the edge of my fence line, my mind racing. Ted Warner wasn't going to stop. I knew it. The next morning, I woke up to the worst news. My barn was burning. Flames were reaching high into the sky, black smoke rolling out like angry clouds. I ran barefoot to the barn, grabbing the garden hose, yelling for Murphy. I dialed 911, my hands shaking. The fire roared like a freight train. The flames had already eaten through the roof. There was no stopping it. The fire crew arrived, and after 40 minutes, the flames were finally under control. But my barmy father's barn was gone. The fire chief came back and handed me a small red gas can. It hadn't exploded. It had been set deliberately. "We'll investigate," he said, "but you might want to be careful, Frank. Someone's got it out for you." I didn't need him to tell me that. I knew who it was. Ted Warner. I wasn't going to let this scare me off. This wasn't just some real estate grab anymore. This was war. But I wasn't rushing in blindly. I hit the county records office that afternoon. Denise, the lady behind the counter, knew me. "What's wrong, Frank?" she asked when she saw my face. "I need everything you've got on the Pine Hollow HOA," I said. "Board members, permits, complaints, anything involving Ted Warner." Her smile faded. "You think they're behind the fire?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." Denise handed me a file thick with papers. I started digging through it. I stayed up all night, reading about fake surveys, bribes, land grabs, and forced HOA expansions. But there it was, a recent email chain where Ted Warner bragged about using scare tactics, and if those didn't work, he'd go as far as setting a fire. That was it. Proof. The next morning, I went to the sheriff's office, handed over the evidence, and said, "This isn't over. He's going to try again." Later that day, a black Cadillac pulled up at my gate. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. "You found him," I said, folding my arms. He smiled thinly. "Ted Warner is prepared to make a generous offer. $500,000 cash. No tricks. Just a fair deal." I laughed. "You think I'd sell now? After everything your boss has done?" He opened the briefcase and turned it toward me. Inside were stacks of crisp $100 bills. I shook my head. "No deal." He smiled, closed the case, and said, "You'll regret this," before walking back to the car. That night, I got a call from Mike, an old friend who worked in tech. "You won't believe this," he said. "I tracked those SUVs that raided your place. They're all registered to Warner's companies." I had really evidence now. Sheriff Harris showed up at my place the next day, just as I was putting up more "no trespassing" signs and setting up motion sensors around the ranch. He didn't need to say much. He just looked at me and said, "This is getting dangerous." By nightfall, I was ready for round 2. They came with bulldozers, trying to clear my land. I wasn't going to let them take it. I drew my sidearm, fired a warning shot, and ordered them off. Murphy was already there, barking and snarling. Sheriff Harris rolled in with his deputies just as they were scattering. The bulldozers were stopped, and the fake crew was arrested. Ted Warner wasn't done yet, though. He tried a federal petition to claim my land under a fake security VYEW. But I wasn't GIVYing in. Not now. Not ever. The battle wasn't over. But with a little help from my friends, we won. Ted Warner was arrested for fraud and racketeering. My land was mine again. And that was a victory I would never take for granted. So, what do you think? Was I right to stand my ground? Or should I have taken the deal? Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's talk about the fight for land, justice, and what happens when greed goes too far.